So in this video I'm going to be showing you how to add glow to a lightsaber, and I just want to say thanks to the photographer and cosplayer for letting me use their photo. I'm first going over to the develop persona, and I'm going to be going back and forth between the different adjustments. So I want the picture to be darker with less contrast and less colour. So I'm first bringing down the exposure, and then I'm bringing up the black point. And then I'm bringing the contrast down. And I'm bringing the black point up a bit more. And then going to the saturation and I'm bringing that down. And the vibrance too. And then I'm bringing the clarity down. And then I've brought the exposure down a bit more. And then I'm moving the temperature slider more towards the blue, which will make the picture a bit more cool toned. But I don't want to lose too much of the reds in the picture either, so I'm moving the tint more towards the pink purple side. And then I'm moving the temperature more towards the blue. And then moving to the shadows and highlights and bringing the shadows up and the highlights down. And then I've moved the contrast up and the saturation too. And then I'm moving the black point up again and the brightness too, because I want less contrast in the picture, but I don't want it to be really flat either. And then I've moved the exposure down. And once I'm happy, I'm clicking develop at the bottom. I've then duplicated the picture and I want to cut out the woman. So I've moved to the selection persona and I'm using the smart selection brush. But the cutout doesn't have to be perfect because I'm not moving her away from the background. I'm only cutting it out so it'll be easier to add the glow from the lightsaber. And then I'm adding a mask layer and then deselect. I'm then moving over to the stock studio and I'm typing in sunset because I want to replace the sky. So I've chosen this one and I've dragged it over. And I want the sun in the new picture to line up as best as it can with the sun in the background picture. So to see it better, I've brought the opacity down. And I want the two people in the boat to be sitting below the hills in the background. Once I've got it lined up, I'm adding a mask layer. And then going back to the photo persona, I've added a fill tool. And I'm dragging down from the top of the picture and I'm changing the bottom colour to black. And then I'm just lining up the sky so it doesn't cover the hills. And it doesn't matter too much if it covers the woman because the cutout is going to go on top anyway. And then staying on the mask layer, I've gone to the brush tool to remove the two people in the boat. And then I brought back the cutout of the woman. Now I'm going to edit the new sky to help it match with the original photo. So I've added a HSL adjustment and I'm bringing the saturation down. And then I'm changing the name of the layer so I know what I'm editing. So I'm changing that one to sky. And then I'm changing the cutout to woman. And then I've rasterized the woman, which will make it one layer. And then I've added a pixel layer and I'm going to start adding some light onto the lightsaber. So I've gone on the brush tool and I'm changing the colour to blue. And then I'm just painting that over the lightsaber. I've then gone on the erase tool to remove a bit that's gone onto the handle. And I'm changing that to vivid light. And then on a new pixel layer, I'm changing the colour to a very light blue, which will be the glow in the centre of the lightsaber. So I'm just making a dot for now. And then on the move tool, I'm making it a lot thinner and dragging out the sides. and I'm dragging that onto the woman as well. And then on the erase tool, I'm removing it from the woman and the handle again. I've changed that to add. I'm then going back on the blue and I'm going to start adding some glow coming from the lightsaber. So with a bigger brush, I've just painted over it. And I've changed that to screen and brought the opacity down. And then I'm dragging out the sides of that white, just because I only want a little bit of the blue beneath it to be showing around the edges. I'm then adding some more glow to the lightsaber, so I'm using that same blue but with a smaller brush. And I'm changing that to add. And I'm then bringing the first layer to the top. I'm then going on that layer and I'm bringing the opacity down. I still feel like there's too much of that blue showing at the top end. So I've made another pixel layer and I've colour selected the light blue white part in the centre. And using a small brush on low opacity, I'm going to paint over the blues and beneath it. And now I'm going to start adding some light onto the woman. So I'm using a bigger brush and I'm mostly just painting over her left side. and I'm changing that to darker colour. I'm bringing the opacity down. And then on the erase tool, I'm just removing some of it from her shoulder. And a bit more from her face and hair. I've then colour selected the lighter blue. And I'm painting over a smaller section of her left. And then I've changed that to colour dodge. And using that same blue, I'm going to start add some more detailed light, which is going to help to add more contrast. So I'm painting over the bits that are already light. And just places where the light would hit from the lightsaber. And I'm changing that to lighter colour. And going back to the erase tool, I'm removing some from parts where it's a bit too much. And then I'm adding some more of that blue onto her face. And I've changed that to colour dodge. And then I'm going to start adding some shadow, so I've changed the colour to a darker blue. And basically doing the opposite to what I've just done. and I've changed that to multiply. And then I'm using a bigger brush and I'm just painting it over her right side. And again changing that to multiply. And then I'm adding a bit more of that lighter blue onto her face again, but I'm keeping it on normal, but bringing the opacity down. And now I'm just adding some more glow around the lightsaber with a bigger brush, and I've changed that to add. And brought the opacity down. And I want to darken the background a bit, but I don't want it to affect the woman. So I've added an exposure adjustment, and I've made sure that sits on top of the background and sky, but beneath the woman. I'm then going back through some of the layers I made for the woman, and I'm just bringing the opacity down on some of them if I need to. And then I'm colouring the sand blue. And I've changed that to multiply. But I'm making sure it's not going to affect the woman again. I've then added an exposure adjustment to the sky to brighten it up a bit. I've then added a colour balance adjustment, which will affect the whole image. And I'm adding some blues into the highlights and some reds into the shadows. And I'm clicking preserve luminance. And then I'm adding a lens flare to the background. But again, I don't want it to affect the woman. And I'm bringing the radius up and I'm clicking Protect Alpha. And this will just help her to stand out a bit more. I'm then adding a clarity filter only to the woman, and I'm bringing that up a tiny bit. And then I'm adding a brightness and contrast adjustment. And I'm bringing both the brightness and contrast up. Then added a pixel layer, and I'm painting a line on the sand, which will be the light from the lightsaber reflected on the sand. And I'm keeping that on normal, but I'm bringing the opacity down. And then I want to make a shadow of the woman. So I'm painting with black and I'm drawing two lines and I'm having them join at the top. And then I'm changing that to soft light and I'm bringing the opacity down. And then I'm moving the shadow on top of the blue that I made for the whole sand, so it sits on top of it rather than beneath it. And I want that shadow to be stronger near her feet, so I've duplicated that shadow, and on the erase tool I've removed most of the duplicate layer but left it darker near her feet. And then changing that blue light on the ground to lighten. And I'm bringing the opacity down. And then I'm bringing the opacity down on the original shadow. And then bringing this X-wing into the picture, which I've already cut out. And I'm first resizing it, and I'm having it in the top left corner. I've then added an exposure adjustment to darken it. I'm changing the blend mode to overlay. And then going back to the exposure adjustment and bringing it up a bit. And then I'm adding a motion blur filter, and I'm kind of dragging down and to the left in the direction that the X-wing would be going, and then I'm bringing the radius down. And then I brought the opacity down a bit just because I don't want it to stand out so much. And then I'm bringing the radius of the blur down a bit more. I've now added an exposure adjustment to brighten up the picture. And then I've added a curves adjustment, and I'm bringing the white points down and the black points up a tiny bit. And then I'm dragging the X-wing layer down so it sits beneath the other adjustments I made for the background. And then I'm bringing the exposure up a bit more. And going back to the X-wing, I brought the opacity down a little bit more. And then I'm bringing the exposure up again. And then I've gone to the exposure adjustment for the background, and I'm bringing that down. I've then added a blue fill layer, and you can change the colour of this on the colour wheel, but I'm keeping it on blue and I'm changing it to soft light. And then I've added a mask layer, and using the paintbrush with the colour on black, I'm painting some of the blue away from the left corners of the picture.